What's up, YouTube? Undead Youth here, back again to bring you guys another guide. Today we're going to be talking about the Marksman Hunter, which might come as a surprise to most of you guys as I've expressed no interest in playing a hunter whatsoever on my channel. But actually, fun fact for you guys, this is actually my favorite class in the game. I actually raided through most of High Mall and Black Rock Foundry as a hunter, and it was the first class that I've ever raided with, so it holds something very near and dear to my heart. I just decided to kind of move away from it as it kind of got a little boring, and now with the announcement of all the changes coming in Legion to the class, I think it might be enough for me to at least take a look at it next expansion. I don't know if I'll raid on it, but it's something to look at. So I decided to use the knowledge that I have of hunters to kind of just bring you guys a basic guide. Again, like all of my guides, this will be geared more towards people who are just starting out in the class, and then not for higher end players. Players are going to be doing things like LFR, normal mode, and maybe jumping into a little bit of heroics too. I hope to provide you some tips for that as well as how you can best maximize the Marksman Hunter in Hellfire Citadel specifically on kind of a fight per fight basis as we go along through this. So without any further ado, let's talk about marksmanship. If you've chosen to play a marksmanship hunter, you probably picked the best spec for Hellfire Citadel at the current point in time, and that is because it has a lot of things going for it. The biggest one being its tremendous single target damage that it can do, and its cleave damage. As you know, there are a ton of fights in Hellfire Citadel that have adds. The thing about these adds that makes it so that Marksman is better than BM is the fact that BM has great sustained and even burst AoE on 3 or more targets. However, Marksman succeeds where BM doesn't, in that it can nuke down priority targets really, really quickly through things like aim shot, huge crits, chimera shot, and then just being able to just continuously channel that damage into a mob, and especially mobs that pop up with high health, which allow them to proc different things. And also when those mobs get very low, they proc different things, because as a marksman hunter, you do increased damage to the boss or to mobs at 2 specific points in the fight, when the boss is above 80% health and when the boss is below 35% health. So that really lends itself very well to being able to nuke down priority ads very quickly, and also being able to cleave priority ads and the boss with things like Chimera Shot, which is just great. So without any further ado, let's talk about our talents so we can get kind of a grip on some things. I want to talk about talents first because they actually add some buttons to our bars, so we kind of need to be aware of them and how they function. So let's go. First thing, your tier 15, you have some choice between survivability mostly and movement speed. So post haste means that your disengage also frees you from all movement impairing effects and increases your movement speed by 60% for 8 seconds. You have narrow escape, which means that disengage also activates a web trap, which immobilizes all targets within 8 yards for 8 seconds. And then finally, you have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera, which reduces the cooldown of disengage by 10 seconds and the cooldown of deterrence by 60 seconds. Okay, so let's talk about post haste. Post haste is definitely an option for you if you use disengage a lot. There are actually some fights where using disengage is actually mandatory, like I believe Blackhand. There is an exploit where you were falling down the hole and you could disengage during the fall and land on the upper level, and you could start nuking stuff, which is cool. And any other time where you make a lot of use out of disengage, so if you're kiting something, if that's your role in the raid, then post haste is very good. Narrow escape is pretty much exclusively PvP, but obviously it does have uses in a raid if anything can be stunned or snared or anything like that. But that is not very likely in a raiding situation, especially not in HFC. And then finally, you have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera, which just flat out reduces the cooldown of disengage by 10 seconds, which is good if any of the other reasons that we previously stated also come into play. And it also reduces the cooldown of deterrence, which is your big protect yourself cooldown, your big personal cooldown, by 60 seconds, which is awesome. I actually like that a lot, so that's what I've taken that. But if you're a big disengaged user, then post haste might be great for you, and like if you need on-demand movement speed, then post haste might be better for you. On to level 30, it really doesn't matter what you take here. It's a big CC tier. It's very relevant for PvP and potentially for 5-man dungeons, but for raiding, a lot of these things don't have much use. So you're going to skip it and really just pick whatever one that you want. Level 45. This is one where I'm going to go ahead and read these guys for you. So you have Exhilaration, which instantly heals you for 30% of, for 30%, and your pet for 100% of max health. Okay, that's what I was like waiting for it to say max health, and it didn't. So just a nice fat heal and a 2-minute cooldown. Then you have Iron Hawk, which reduces all damage taken by 10%. And then Spirit Bond, while your pet is active, you and your pet will regenerate 2% of total health every 2 seconds. Okay, so I have taken Exhilaration here because I think really, in all honesty, the last time I played my Hunter, I was still raiding and doing Orgorger. And there are times where you're out of the range of healers in Orgorger, so I was taking this. In which case, it is pretty cool. Also, like, I foresee this being potentially relevant on something like Iron Reaver. Again, where you might be out of the range of healers. But other than that, I probably wouldn't go with Exhilaration, but like I said, it does have those useful points. I'd probably just go with Iron Hawk. Generally speaking, damage reduced is damage that doesn't have to be healed, which means it doesn't require mana from the healer to deal with it. So it's usually better for the raid overall than having something where you could potentially heal yourself up. It is nice having the emergency button, but usually the 10% less damage just means that your healers have to work less to be able to heal you, which means the raid as a whole will be able to survive longer. And then you have Spirit Bond. Spirit Bond is an absolute no-go for me because I'm taking Lone Wolf. If you're taking Lone Wolf, you obviously can't make use of Spirit Bond, but even if I was using a pet, which is still pretty suboptimal, I still probably wouldn't use Spirit Bond just because it is wasted when you're at full health, but as soon as you take damage, like Iron Hawk is good. I mean, you could say that any one of these guys is wasted when you're at full health, but at the very least, Iron Hawk will reduce the damage that you take initially as soon as you do start taking damage. And then that 2% that you're regenerating isn't that helpful, and isn't going to save your life in the long run, even if you are out of the range of the healer, because usually that's something bad's going on. Like, for instance, if you're talking about Iron Reaver, you could be out of the range of a healer and then get hit with artillery. Spirit Bond's not going to help you there. So in general, Spirit Bond doesn't get a look in for any hunter, and especially not for marksman. Moving on to level 60, you have Steady Focus, which means that when you use Steady Shot twice in a row, you increase your focus regeneration rate of you and your pet by 50% for 10 seconds. You have Dire Beast, which summons a powerful wild beast to attack your target for 15 seconds. Each time the beast deals damage, you will gain 2 focus. And then finally, you have Thrill of the Hunt. You have a 6% chance per 10 focus spent on focus costing abilities to trigger Thrill of the Hunt. Thrill of the Hunt reduces the focus cost of your next 3 arcane shots, aim shots, or multi-shots by 20. Alright, so these guys are what's primarily going to change your gameplay, really. Steady Focus means that you just have to try to remember that anytime that you, like every 10 seconds, you basically have to Steady Shot twice, which isn't the hardest thing in the world to do. I personally don't think that this marries up very well with another talent later on down the tree called Focusing Shot, which means that you can't move when you cast it, and it replaces your Steady Shot, which makes it really, hard to make it so that you have points where you can Steady Shot, or at that point, Focusing Shot twice with other things going on in the encounter. But that's neither here nor there. If you're just looking at the talent for what it is, it's perfectly fine, and it gives you very smooth focus regeneration over the course of a fight, and it's definitely an option that you might want to take. However, it doesn't really help you as a marksmanship hunter as much as it would for a BM hunter to be able to have smooth focus regen, as we need very spiky focus regen, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Also, you're kind of missing out on the whole pet thing if you've taken Lone Wolf again. Now you have Dire Beast. Dire Beast summons a guy, it attacks a guy, and then you get 2 focus every time it does damage. Personally speaking, I think that unless there's a legitimate reason to take Dire Beast, like the fact that its cooldown lines up very well with Bestial Wrath, I don't think that you should take it, because mechanically speaking, it's one of the harder ones to make use of, because it does everything on its own, so you would think that's great. But in actuality, the Beast has the problems that all other pets have, whereas that it actually has to deal damage for you to get the focus back, which means that a ton of things could happen. If you're doing target switching, which, like I said, Marksman is actually good at, if you're doing a lot of target switching, that pet actually has to physically run and be in range to attack things. And if it's not doing that, it's not generating you focus. If what it's attacking is immune, it also is not giving you focus. So despite the fact that Dire Beast seems really easy and you can just cast it on cooldown, once you really start to look at your focus and try to better yourself as a hunter, you're going to quickly notice that Dire Beast probably isn't going to net you the amount of focus that the other two will if you're even halfway competent at keeping steady focus up. And then finally, we have Thrill of the Hunt. Thrill of the Hunt is actually the go-to for marksmen in pretty much all situations because of the fact that it reduces the focus cost of two of our most important abilities, aim shot and multi-shot. Multi-shot is actually crap, but we'll talk about why it's nice that at the very least Thrill of the Hunt does reduce its cost. But the most important thing is aim shot, and it actually flows very, very well with our careful aim phase, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Just know that it's pretty much mandatory because of how well it works with the class. You have some sort of additional DPS cooldown in level 75. Murder of Crows summons a flock of crows to attack a target for over the next 15 seconds. If the target dies while under the attack, a Murder of Crows cooldown is reset. Then you have Blink Strikes, which your pet's basic attack deal 50% increased damage and can now be used from 30 yards away and will instantly teleport them behind their target. Then you have Stampede, summons all of your pets to fight your current target for 40 seconds while in an arena or battleground. These pets deal 25% of their normal damage. Okay, so Murder of Crows can be really good on fights where there are priority ads that need to be burned out very quickly and will die within the 15 seconds that Murder of Crows is on them, so that you can have that cooldown reset and you can go off and kill somebody again. Think about like that one really specific phase in Archimon where all the guys come out of the portal and those mobs die relatively quickly. You'll get a ton of damage out of Murder of Crows on that, and it'll actually be pretty beneficial for the raid if you can nuke down like the green guy, and you can still also potentially hit the Death Caller and stuff like that. Murder of Crows can be really, really useful there. So even though it's not my pick of the tier, it's not the worst thing in the world either. However, Blink Strikes is pretty much the worst thing in the world, and obviously if you're taking Lone Wolf, it is completely and utterly useless. Even if you don't take Lone Wolf and you take either Exotic Munitions or Focusing Shot, you're still probably not going to want to take Blink Strikes because your pet just doesn't do that much damage on its own. We're not Beast Mastery Hunters. We don't get our pets passively buffed through Mastery and also buffed actively through Bestial Wrath. So really Blink Strikes isn't necessary, and you're just going to get way more damage from the other two abilities 100% of the time for Marksman. Finally, you have Stampede, which is just great. It is a resourceless big cooldown that lines up with things like Bloodlust and other stuff and heavy damage moments in the fight, and it's just generally going to be your best option because it does so much damage. A Murder of Crows, like I said, does have moments where it might be good, but almost always it's just a matter of is it that just slightly better than Stampede, because Stampede is a really, really strong baseline to have for a hunter. It's just definitely going to be your best pick almost 100% of the time. Level 90, you have Glaive Toss, which you hurl 2 glaives towards the target, dealing blah blah damage to each target or each enemy struck in between, and reducing movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. The primary target will take 4 times the amount of damage from each strike. And the glaives return to you and hit everything on the way back. Then you have Power Shot, a powerful shot which deals blah blah damage, physical damage mind you, and physical damage to all targets in between, and they are all knocked back. Then you have Barrage, which just sprays bullets in a direction in front of you, in front of the direction you are facing. So Glaive Toss is probably going to be your best single target option if you don't have a specific set bonus, which if you have that set bonus, you know what it is. I don't usually cover set bonuses in my videos because that's really not who this video is for. But if you have your 4-piece Terry Keen set bonus, you are not going to take Glaive Toss, you're going to take Power Shot. But Glaive Toss is really nice because it's instant cast, it is a really short cooldown, and a really low focus cost. You will find that once you get comfortable with your marksman rotation, there's very little to do in between when Barrage, or I'm sorry, I just told you to take Barrage, when Chimera Shot comes off cooldown, and when you don't have enough focus to reliably aim shot and you don't have Thrill of the Hunt procs, there's very little to do other than hit Steady Shot until you can hit Chimera Shot, but don't cap focus, which we'll talk about the rotation later, but that's pretty much it. So Glaive Toss is really nice to throw it in there and just give you something else to press. And it does decent damage too. It does a lot of damage on a single target, but can also be useful in AoE situations as well. Power Shot, it's pretty much the same ability. However, it does have a 45-second cooldown and does have the same focus cost, but does have a cast time, but it knocks things back. What's really cool about the knockback is it can be useful if there needs to be something that needs to be interrupted, and having that reliability in that spell can actually be incredible in certain fights, or little to no use on other fights. It really just depends. But I personally, unless you have a specific set bonus that makes use of it, I would just go with the instant cast ability because it's so much easier to weave into your rotation, which is already so locked by having all of these long cast spells, as we'll talk about. And then finally, you have Barrage. Barrage is the go-to ability anytime there is more than one target. Hands down, just does more damage than the other two. It's not worth casting on a single target, but it hits everything. So anytime there's more than two targets, really you need more than one target, but especially more than two or three, Barrage, hands down. And that's pretty much means that it's going to be your default pick if you're doing things like dungeons, you're doing things like LFRs and stuff, because they're just always going to be trash and almost always going to be pulled in bigger clumps than it should be because tanks are tanks. And so Barrage is just going to be your baseline, and it's really just when and where can I really make a lot of use out of Glaive Toss or Power Shot? Is it a single target only fight, like maybe something like Chrome Rock, but even then the hands are pretty juicy for Barrage. But then you have to ask yourself, really, is the Barrage damage that I'm doing helpful to kill the boss and for the success of the raid, or is it just padding the meters? And I'll leave you to answer that, and I'll leave you to answer if you really care or not, as most hunters don't. But in general, Barrage is the one you want to go with. And then finally, you have the tier 100, which is exotic munitions, which basically gives you two different types of ammo. The only thing you really need to know about these guys is that incendiary ammo is your AoE, and then poison ammo is your single target, and frozen ammo is not used generally for raiding. Focus shot, which replaces your steady shot. You carefully line up the target doing more damage than steady shot would by generating 50 focus, which is awesome. And then, like I said, it replaces steady shot. And then finally, you have Lone Wolf. While you don't have a pet active, your damage dealt with auto shot, steady shot, aim shot, chimera shot, and kill shot is increased by 30%, and you're able to provide several beneficial effects for your party and raid. Typically speaking, exotic munitions never taken. It just doesn't do enough, and it's unfortunate because I think it's a really cool idea, and actually adds some variation depending on it, and something you can change on the fly. Depending on how many targets you're facing, but unfortunately it just doesn't do nearly enough damage or enough for the class overall than the other two abilities, so it's never taken. There is Focusing Shot, which is really cool. Actually, it gives you a ton of focus, so if you feel like you're focus starved, this might be the answer for you. But you can't move when you cast this ability, so it's going to change that, and quickly you'll find that actually generating 50 focus isn't always the best thing, because it's really easy to focus cap. And again, I don't think this works really well with steady focus, because if you back-to-back focusing shot, you have 100 focus. So it's kind of wasting the focus that would be gained from steady focus, and also it means that you'd be tied down to not moving twice in a row. I really just don't see those two talents working together, but even then, like, I personally don't like it because I have to really be careful about capping my focus, and I can't move. But there's definitely some use to be made out of it, as it's kind of like the most synergistic thing in the world with your mastery. So then you have Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf is just the default ability of the tier, because of the fact that it just increases your damage of all your important abilities, and it just is going to do more damage than the other ones 9 times out of 10, because it doesn't require any specific instance to make it good, right? It doesn't even require you to cast, expel multiple times enough. Like, Focusing Shot really is only as good as how many times you can cast it, right? Well, Lone Wolf affects pretty much every single ability that you have, so I don't really see how it could possibly be worse than any of the other ones in the tier. So, generally speaking, most people go with Lone Wolf, and I would agree. But if you really want to play with a pet, you can take the other two talents. They won't be too much worse, but they definitely won't be as good. So we've talked a lot about the talents now, so we've kind of added some things to our bars. Let's talk about how you play this guy, okay? There's two really important phases, like we talked about before, when you're playing your Marksman Hunter. Those phases are going to be your careful aim phase and your rapid fire phase. I'm sorry, completely messed that up. All the abilities sound the same. Your careful aim phase and your kill shot are your execute phase. Okay, so you might wonder, what is careful aim? If you've ever been interested in a marksman hunter, you've definitely heard that phrase before. Careful aim is a passive that we have which increases our critical strike chance of our steady shot, focusing shot, and aim shot by 50% on targets that are above 80% health or while rapid fire is active. What does this mean? It means that when the target is above 80% health, so on the pull, and also when a priority ad pops and it has very high health, we have the opportunity to crit a lot more with aim shot, which is really important. And it also means that when we're generating focus with our steady shot during those moments in time, when we're trying to facilitate more aim shots, we're also not losing as much DPS as we would be because we're pretty much assured to crit. So what this means is you also have to look at some of our other abilities, because this is where the majority of the synergy comes with marksman. During careful aim, you have a 50% chance, or an 50% increased chance, I should say, to critically strike with your aim shot, right? If you have enough critical strike on your gear, 53% to be exact, because of the actual raid boss suppression. If you guys don't know what that is, basically normally if I had 50% critical strike on my gear and 50% critical strike from careful aim, I would have all crits during careful aim. But fun fact for you guys, if you didn't know this, bosses have a 3% critical strike suppression rating, which means that we need 53% on our gear plus the 50% that comes from careful aim to have a total of 103% critical strike chance to have all crits during careful aim. Just a fun fact for you guys if you didn't know that. So why is this important? One, we do a lot of damage to the boss, but also we have this neat little passive called enhanced aim shot, which means that your aim shot critical strikes grant you 20 focus. Obviously this works really well with careful aim. So basically, if you look at it, you have your aim shot, which costs you 50 focus. And then it's almost assured to be a critical strike, and especially if you do get higher up there in gear levels, it can be assured a critical strike every single time you use it when the boss is above 80%, and it will refund you 20 focus. So that means that your aim shots really only end up causing a net loss of 30 focus. However, let's also add Thrill of the Hunt into the equation. Thrill of the Hunt reduces our aim shot cost by 20%. So every aim shot initially costs us, well, at least when we're under the effect of Thrill of the Hunt, every aim shot costs us 30 focus, and then we are refunded 20 focus, which means that every aim shot under Thrill of the Hunt and Careful Aim is a net loss of only 10 focus, which if we look at that to its original 50 focus cost, that's 5 times cheaper, but all the damage, right? So that's good. We want that, because at the end of the day, that just means more aim shots that we can tunnel into the boss or to the ad, which is very important, right? So that's kind of like the synergy that goes on between these guys, and it will affect how you gear, how you gem, how you enchant, and all of that good stuff to try to hit that 53% on your gear, so that during careful aim you can do nothing but crit and spam aim shot while the boss is above 80% health. The only other thing that you need to remember is that you do have this awesome little ability called Chimera Shot, which is going to be your most important thing you need to look after no matter what percentage of health the boss is at. It just does a ton of damage to your primary target, and if there's another target nearby, will also do damage to them, which makes it useful in single target and AoE situations. And we also can glyph it so that it will heal us as well. So it's just all around awesome. So when the boss is above 80% health, you have a very, very standard rotation. It's very simple. You're pretty much going to be Chimera Shot on cooldown. You're going to use aim shot as much as you can. And then if you ever run out of focus, you're going to use steady shot, which is why those are my 1, 2, 3 key. I know, complex, right? But that's going to be kind of the idea when the boss is above 80%. Now, when the boss falls below 80%, your things kind of change just a little bit. You still want to make sure that you're hitting Chimera Shot on cooldown, but then your aim shot kind of returns to being like this huge 50 focus. So what you're going to be pretty much doing is you're going to be using your steady focus or your steady shot um, until your Chimera shot comes off cooldown, and then all the while using your level 90 talent, whatever that is, barrage, glaive toss, power shot, whatever, using those guys on cooldown, and then using steady focus to make sure that you have enough focus to use Chimera shot and your level 90 talent when they come on cooldown. And then the only time that you want to use aim shot when the boss is not above 80% is as a focus dump. And if you guys don't know what the concept of a focus dump is, we're going to talk about that right now. So, first things first, we want to talk about what resource capping is. In this case, we're going to talk about focus. Focus has a maximum of 120, right? I cannot have any more than 120 focus. However, whether my character is in combat or out of combat, whether my character has 120 focus, 10 focus, 100 focus, it doesn't matter. My character will always attempt to generate focus based on my haste rating, okay? So that means that while I'm sitting at 120% or 120 focus in combat, I am essentially wasting focus. It's kind of like the idea of trying to fill up a glass of water from the faucet, when the glass is already full. Then the water that you would be trying to catch in the cup just falls down the drain. And it's very similar here. Any focus that I try to generate, whether it be through using steady focus or just from the natural focus regeneration that I have, just goes down the drain. And you might think that's not such a big deal, you know, here and there, like 1 focus here, 1 focus there, 10 focus here, 10 focus there. But when you start doing silly things like steady shotting during when you have 120 focus, that's 14 focus that's gone. You do that a couple of times, and there goes an aim shot here, there goes a Chimera shot there goes a barrage there, and that's wasted damage. So if you're wondering what the difference is between you and another hunter that might be way higher on the charts than you, it might just be because they're not capping their focus as much. And aim shot is an excellent, what we call focus dump, which basically means when we get close to hitting the 120 max for our focus, we use aim shot, and it instantly almost cuts our focus bar in half, right? And then it gives us some more breathing room to steady shot before we cap our focus again. And that's really the role that aim shot is going to take for you. Yes, aim shot does a ton of damage, and it might crit, and it might generate you focus, and that's great. And that's actually a really important segue that we can talk about how aim shot, or the enhanced aim shot perk, works. And it's really important that it's worded the way that it is. Your enhanced aim shot critical strikes refund you 20 focus. It doesn't reduce the cost of your abilities, which is so important. So important, which basically means that even if I'm at 120 focus and I use my aim shot and it crits, I am granted the focus for that after the 50 is deducted, so I don't ever waste a resource, which is so cool. And it's very important that it's worded like that, right? So you might see like your abilities might like look really dark and you can't use them for a second, and then they might pop up. It's because the game calculates your granted focus from things like your critical strikes after it deducts the focus for the actual ability, and then it has to hit the target and check if it crits and all that good stuff. So there's going to be a slight discrepancy, but believe me, as annoying as that is, you want that as opposed to potentially overcapping your resources. So that's going to be the focus of aim shot. So when your target is below 80%, it's pretty much just Chimera shot on cooldown, level 90 on cooldown. And between that, steady focus is going to be, or steady shot's going to be your filler. And then you're going to use aim shot as a focus dump. Now this is all on a single target, right? This is all on 2 targets. This is all on 3 targets. This is all on like 4 targets. Anytime you have like 5 or more targets, that's when you want to start talking about an AoE rotation. And let me tell you, the one thing you really need to remember about Marksman AoE is that it is god awful. And I mean terrible. I mean it, guys. It's bad. It's really fucking bad, right? You're really just not going to want to go for this type of rotation if you don't have to. So the whole Marksman AoE thing is all tied to one thing, and it's multi-shot. And the passive we have called Bombardment, which if I can pull it up here for you guys. Alright, so Bombardment. Your critical strikes with multi-shot cause your subsequent multi-shots to cost 25 less focus and cause 60% additional damage for 5 seconds. This basically means that you have to crit with your multi-strike, which means that you really only want to use multi-strike and use this bombardment strategy when there's a lot of mobs to more or less ensure that you are going to be able to actually crit. Now, it's really nice that your whole strategy is based off of crit. You're going to be stacking crit really high, but even then, it's because of the fact that multi-shot costs 40 focus, right? It costs 40 focus. So what is that? I'm really bad at math, but I think that's a third. That is a third of our focus bar right there gone in the initial multi-shot. Even if the other ones cost 25% less, it's still usually not worth it. But it basically means that you can spam multi-shot on targets, assuming that you crit. And the multi-shots really don't do that much damage. In all actuality, this is why like below 4 targets, you pretty much just want to be using your single target rotation and kind of augmenting it a little bit if you can, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the fact of the matter is multi-shot doesn't do that much damage, and against not a lot of enemies, you're not going to be sure if it's going to crit. So in general, I would personally just almost never use the whole bombardment talent unless it's something that's just going to die really, really quickly. It's like trash mobs or something like that. And I mean like trash mobs that don't live for very long, then you're way better off just using bombardment at that point in time. But if they're like actual elite mobs that have a purpose and there's any sort of priority to killing them that will make the run easier, then you're better off using your single target rotation in almost all situations, because it's going to be at least more beneficial for the raid if you can kill something that needs to die when it needs to die, right? That's usually what's going to be better, and that's the strength of marksman. Not every class is an enhancement shaman. It's going to be using every single global to nuke the fuck out of everything around them. We are much better than they are, and than most classes are, at being able to tell that one thing in front of us, fuck you, you're going to die. That's what we're there for. So bombardment, not so great. Other than that, you want to be using your level 90 talent on cooldown, because all of them have the ability to do damage to multiple targets, and barrage obviously being the best. Then you have Chimera Shot. You want to be using that on cooldown as well, because again it hits 2 targets for a ton of damage. And then you want to be using Steady Shot as needed to be able to provide you the focus to do those things. The only other thing of note is Explosive Trap, which you set down and it does like a relatively paltry amount of damage to everything around it, but the more targets, the more damage it'll do. So definitely throw that in there. It's really nice. Anytime you're facing like 3 or more targets, I think, because it actually gives you some small amount of damage that's being done to everything around you while you're doing things like casting aim shot or using steady shot to get focus and stuff. You're still actually doing some damage to everything else around you, so that's pretty cool. Other than that, let's talk a bit more. We talked a bit about the 80% range. We talked a bit about the in between 80 and 35 range. Now let's talk about your 35% range, which is your execute phase. You actually get kill shot ability that you don't have throughout the rest of the fight, which does a massive amount of damage to the target. And if it doesn't kill the target, it resets its cooldown once, which is crazy. So you can use it twice before it incurs its cooldown, and just does a ton of damage. And it will always be your priority if the ability is active. If the target's below 35% health, it is always your priority, because it just does too much damage, and you don't get the opportunity to use it at any other point through the fight. At that point in time, when the boss is below 35% health, you still want to, pretty much do your single target rotation like normal, but obviously prioritizing kill shot. If it's an ad that's going to die really, really quickly, too quickly for you to do things like use aim shot, you pretty much just want to be using Chimera Shot and then kill shot, and then if you have glaive toss, throw that in. You want to try to get in the damage as quick as you can, so rely on your instant cast at that point in time. But other than that, that's kind of kill shot in a nutshell. It just does more damage at another point in the fight, right? In terms of your cooldown usage, you really only have 2, and that's if you take in Stampede. This could also be a Murder of Crows if you've chosen it. And then you're pretty much just going to use this at moments where you would benefit from things like Bloodlust, or if the boss takes increased damage, because it does a ton of damage but has a long cooldown. So if you can sync it to those moments, then you're going to be able to get the most out of it. And then Rapid Fire should be used as many times as possible throughout the fight, and just increases your haste by 40% for 15 seconds. What's really cool about this is that it also, by and large, increases your focus regeneration, because you'll be able to do things like use more steady shots. You'll also be able to cast aim shot quicker, and I believe Barrage actually does more damage under the effects of Rapid Fire. But the most important thing about rapid fire, of course, if you guys are listening, which you probably aren't by now, is that it also helps you out with careful aim. You also get careful aim just like if the boss was above 80% during rapid fire, which is why even though rapid fire is really strong and you want to sync it up with those moments of big damage that the boss takes, or bloodlust if you can, you also want to just use it as many times as you can over the course of a fight, because it's going to give you that careful aim, big juicy crits, and all that regenerated focus, right? So definitely do that. The only other thing of note that I want to talk to you guys about is Thrill of the Hunt and how to best use that. So basically, pretend focus spin, you have a 6% chance to get 3 stacks of the buffs Thrill of the Hunt, and it reduces the cost of your abilities. So it's going to change an otherwise pretty static playstyle by when you get these procs. Then and only then should you be considering doing things like aim shot or multi-shot, depending on how many targets you have, as anything but dumps for your focus. At that point in time, when you have Thrill of the Hunt, you do want to try to use those stacks within the realm of probability as quickly as you possibly can. So, for instance, you want to prioritize using aim shot or multi-shot when you have Thrill of the Hunt up, but you don't want it to overwrite things like your Chimera shot or even your level 90 talent, because of how quickly those guys come off of cooldown. But you still want to try to use those things, because you never ever want to wind up in a situation where Thrill of the Hunt just falls off, because that's just wasted. That's less focus generated, or just less focus saved, which is, less ability or less damage done over the course of the fight. And you also don't want to get into a situation where you proc Thrill of the Hunt again and you have 3 or 2 charges of Thrill of the Hunt left. It can be quite nice to be able to go from one Thrill of the Hunt to another back to back by having maybe 1 charge and that happening, but when you start to get into 2 or 3 charges wasted every single time you proc a Thrill of the Hunt because you didn't use the one before it, that's the exact same thing as wasting your focus. You don't want that to happen either. So that's another reason why Thrill of the Hunt is really cool for Marksman, because it adds that other layer of complexity. And that's really the last thing I can leave you with. Really, in general, this strategy and this playstyle is not that difficult, but what's going to really decide whether or not you're as good as the Marksman Hunter standing next to you is whether you pay attention to the little things, the very small things. You always want to be able to hit your Chimera shot on cooldown because of how quickly it comes off cooldown, the fact that it's instant, the fact that it does a ton of damage and it heals you. You always want to be able to hit that on cooldown. You always want to hit your level 90 talent on cooldown. You want to know, based on everything that's going on in the fight, how long the ads are going to live, how important they are, if I should be using things like aim shot and going through my single target rotation, or if I should be trying to use bombardment. You want to be trying to have your explosive trap down for that extra little bit of damage. You want to obviously maximize everything that you can during your careful aim phase, and also maximize the use of rapid fire. And you also don't want to cap focus, and you don't want to cap your Thrill of the Hunt procs. You will be able to do decent damage if you mess up any one of those things, or any combination of those things. It's not going to affect your damage too much. Like, I'm rusty, and I still almost top DPS on this LFR I was doing, which is irrelevant, I know. But the point is, like, even with all the rust on me, I was still able to do relatively well. But there were a ton of missed opportunities for me. It's kind of like if you've ever worked at a place where they say something really annoying, like, it's not a mistake, it's just an area of opportunity or opportunity for improvement. It's the exact same thing. You're not going to suffer too much if you do things like cap your focus or overcap your Thrill of the Hunt or anything like that, but that's just wasted damage, right? And that's what's going to be the difference between you and the other hunters, right? So that's really what I want to leave you guys with. If you guys have any questions about hunters, please leave them in the comments. I know a fair bit about them. If you guys like the video, please rate, comment, and subscribe. And then until then, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of the support that you guys have given me so far. Thank you. Bye-bye.